From the Cosgun Lab and the Bioengineering Media Lab at Georgia Tech, welcome to Lab Coat Conversations, where you too can join the discussion on the next academic breakthroughs. Join your host, Hector Torres, as we talk to Georgia Tech researchers. This episode, please welcome Edward Botchwey.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your lab for the audience?
Sure. So I am a full professor here in BME. I've got my PhD from University of Pennsylvania. Did a brief postdoc there. Started my faculty career at University of Virginia, working in the area of biomaterials and regenerative medicine. Started here in 2012 and continue to work in that space, mainly focused on musculoskeletal regeneration and repair. We have special interest in harnessing kind of inflammation and specified immune subsets in increasing the regenerative capacity of musculoskeletal tissues like bones and muscle. We also have interests in inflammation resolution pathways and lipid mediators in cell characterization, particularly mesenchymal stem cells. And we also have similar interest in inflammation resolution pathways as it plays out in sickle cell disease pathologies. So, diverse set of interests and a great group that I enjoy working with.
That's great. So you talk a lot about regenerative medicine, right? Do you use any specific machine learning and or AI tools in your lab to help with the data that you collect?
We do. I would not consider myself an expert in computational methods or machine learning. But we do employ dimensionality reduction techniques in analyzing single cell cytometric data from, basic multicolor flow cytometry. We also have been moving in the direction of both proteomic and genomic sequencing and analysis. What generally we do is, we try to create animal models of musculoskeletal injury and do various single cell analysis techniques. And so, the dimensionality reduction stuff that we do just helps us to make sense of the complexity of the data sets that we generate. Beyond that, there may be some other machine learning applications that we have delved into, but those are the main points of emphasis right now.
And in your lab currently, do you have any interesting projects in development coming up that you can tell us about?
Sure. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is the problem of reduced regenerative capacity in skeletal muscle as we age, right? That's going to be an increasingly significant societal and medical problem. It is an obvious complication in traumatic injury settings, but it also is one of the primary kind of potential sources of disability and reduced activity, in the elderly. And so, some of the bioactive lipids that we have been studying, we think, are playing a role in reducing your ability to resolve inflammation in aging. And we think that also manifests itself in a reduced ability to heal wounds. And because of the knowledge we have about how bioactive lipid signaling is regulated, we're collaborating to develop fusion peptides that can essentially reset some of the, signaling pathways and the balances that are struck in young patients that get dysregulated in old patients, so that we think we can come up with interventions that can help musculoskeletal injuries heal much more effectively, both in young patients, but particularly in kind of aged animals in a way that we're excited about. So we're excited about, I would say, customized immunotherapies that can enhance regenerative capacity in musculoskeletal tissues.
That's really cool, actually. So this is a little bit more of a side tangent, but a little birdie told me that you have very strong opinions on ChatGPT. I don't know if you want to go into that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think that I am very pro generative AI tools, and their integration in the various activities that we do in higher education. I use it in my teaching to help develop explainers for students, and content and assessments that I think have been clearer and more effective. I use it in the course of just everyday communication at times, so that I can, especially with my students, identify certain areas or knowledge gaps that we may be dealing with that are critical to address in planning our experiments or the activities that we're doing in the lab. Obviously we could use it for, editing and writing of, grants and papers. And so at the end of the day, much like a calculator is a, tool that we use to save time in making hand calculations, I view AI tools as, glorified, calculators. They're like ways in which we can build second brains to help us kind of focus on the things that these generative AI tools are not good at. I think some of the more, ideally we can cut down on what some of the routine aspects of our work are so that we can really focus on the human creativity and innovation that is, I think, what we're all excited to see progress. And so, so I don't see AI tools as a threat to our jobs
Mhm.
or as an obstacle to student training and learning. I see it managed properly as a real advance in all the things that we do. So yeah, I'm pro AI, and I find it an interesting, both philosophical and scientific topic to think about.
Mhm. Have you seen maybe your colleagues or people in your lab use ChatGPT for any purpose?
I have to say that the majority of the colleagues that I have talked to about this are pretty reluctant to use it, mainly because of the dangers of hallucination, in that ChatGPT may be, generating wrong information that finds its way into, our papers or presentations or our, kind of communication. And the other concern that I've heard, frequently is about the kind of protection of data, and intellectual property concerns, copyright issues. My view is that these are addressable concerns, and I've kind of for my group, I've put some both policy and information together for our lab to mitigate the risks of, those kinds of things, so that we can be free to use the tools, without, some of the, without the some of those more negative consequences coming into play. So, so I don't have great examples of colleagues who've really used it in any substantial way, but it's as you say, what the little birdie may have told you is that's definitely a direction that my personal, that I in particular in my lab, I think is moving toward.
That's great. Yeah. Getting back to the topic of your lab a little bit, do you have any advice for students who may be either looking for a lab or maybe interested in your lab specifically?
So, my advice about graduate school in particular is that the experience is much more about your connection and contribution with a PI and a laboratory than it is about the program. I can't really emphasize enough the importance of that relationship and finding the right fit, right? Because I think, oftentimes you think about the ranking and you want to go to the strongest program, and much like in undergrad, you kind of want to go to the best school, right? But certainly, grad school is, I think your outcomes are much more, dependent on that relationship with, your professor. And similarly, even undergrads that want to work in my lab, it's really much more about the relationships that they have with, their graduate student or postdoctoral direct mentor. And so, my advice is to, be as thoughtful and as intentional as you can about, the lab that you choose. It's not just about the person who's doing the research that you want to do, because PhDs are a very flexible degree. I mean, sometimes you want to work for a person who just does that thing that you dream about. But, PhDs are a very flexible degree in that you're learning how to learn. In an ideal world, you get a PhD, that's an opportunity for you to apply that skill in, kind of knowledge acquisition to the areas that you are excited about in the future. And so that's why I went into academia, because there were questions that I really wanted to learn how to pursue and to make, new contributions to how we understood certain things about how tissues heal and what role the immune system plays. That's what I got excited about. But it's not necessarily what I did for my PhD, right? So, but I wouldn't trade my PhD mentoring experience for anything because of the relationship that I had and the things that I learned along the way. So, so that's definitely, my advice. And I think that as far as my lab is concerned, I tend to be very open about what I think the things that I do well and the things that I don't do well, right? So like for me, and I think probably many of my colleagues would as well, I think that, having open conversations with aspiring students about what they're really looking for and whether, the environment of the lab and the approach of the, kind of the PI in the lab is a right fit for them, and thinking about that, at least on par with, the particular research area or the, size of the lab or some of the other factors is certainly as important, and I would argue more.
Yeah, that's some great information there. Well, that's all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come talk to me.
Yeah,
Um, Actually, one last question. I lied a little bit.
sure.
If students have more questions, where can they find you? How can they contact you?
Yeah. So, you probably had a birdie tell you too, I hate email. So like, yeah, but you're welcome. People are welcome to reach out to me via Teams. And I'm not hard to find that way. Email connections may be a little more challenging, but I am, email responsiveness notwithstanding, interested to follow up with anybody who's interested in some of these topics or our group.
Great, perfect. Again, thank you so much for talking with me.